Hi, I'm Jeff Bond, and welcome to the Steward Chair, our show about how great leaders build enduring companies that leave a lasting legacy. We believe that leadership isn't about ownership, it's about stewardship. So whether you started your own company or have been entrusted to lead it, we want to help you be a better steward of the people, the mission, and the future that you create through this show. And so the only favor we'll ever ask of you is that you follow this podcast wherever you listen. Thank you. Before we dive in, I would love to introduce you to today's guest, someone whose values-driven leadership truly embodies the spirit we have here at the Steward Chair. John Lauseng is the CEO of the Aldrich Group of Companies, a West Coast-based multidisciplinary professional services firm that specializes in accounting, wealth management, and advisory services. With over 400 team members across 8 offices and a fast-growing portfolio, Aldrich is now closing in on 9 figures in annual revenue. Since stepping into the CEO role in late 2019, John has guided the firm through a period of both uncertainty and growth, anchoring every decision in Aldrich's core purpose to improve the lives of its people, clients, and communities. When the pandemic hit, John and his partners led with conviction, guaranteeing no layoffs, no pay cuts, and full transparency, while empowering their teams to show up with trust, care, and purpose. Under his leadership, Aldrich has deepened its cultural foundation, expanded thoughtfully through acquisition, and continue to be recognized as one of the best places to work in professional services. John was recently named Executive of the Year by Portland Business Journal, included in Accounting Today's MP Elite list, and serves as the chair-elect of our friends at CP America. And today's conversation explores what it means to lead a legacy firm with entrepreneurial spirit, to model rest and renewal at scale, and to elevate people-first values as a lasting competitive advantage. So let's get into it. John, welcome to the Steward Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, there's always people that stand out to you when you go to conferences, and I had the good fortune of meeting you at a leadership retreat last year, and your integrity, your character, your intention as an executive leader just immediately stood out to me. So I'm really happy to bring your insights to our audience today.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say. I appreciate it. And I had the same reaction when I met you, Jeff. I could tell that everything you do is with purpose. And I've been looking forward to this.
All right, great. Well, let's jump right in. I want to start with we always like to talk about the definition of stewardship because we all think about things differently. And here at the Steward Chair, we define it as a long-term responsibility of a leader to care for what's been entrusted to them, whether that's people, a mission, a company, a community. It's not for personal gain, but for the flourishing of others and the health of future generations, and it's temporary. And so I want to start with just your definition of stewardship and how that affects your day-to-day leadership.
Yeah, I don't know that I've codified this exactly what my definition is, but I think if I did, it would be something like this. Being entrusted to take something from the people that came before us and honor the mission, the vision, the values that were established before us to provide opportunities to improve people's lives and create a lasting business.
I really like that. You came in to this role, I know during COVID, but you had been a partner for many years prior to that. And so there were people that came before you that were keeping the seat warm for you. You filled that seat, and now you're keeping that seat warm for the next person. What did that kind of vote of confidence to bring you into that executive leadership role mean to you at the time? And how do you carry that day to day in your leadership now?
Well, at Aldrich, something that's really uniquely characterized us is giving people the opportunity, maybe before they're quite ready. And I can absolutely tell you that that was the case for me. I think that the people that gave me the opportunity to take the leadership role probably had more confidence in my ability to do it at the time than I did. But I knew I was surrounded by good people who were going to support me, who are going to let me make mistakes and fail, which is all part of stewardship. And so that was in the fall of 2019. And I knew that I had a lot to learn. I had no idea the pace at which I would learn it.
I love what you said that you're giving people opportunities prior to them being ready. What does it really mean to be ready? And how do you identify kind of that succession of who is a potential leader within your company and
Yeah.
when to give them that opportunity?
Yeah, we do this on an ongoing basis, and we have succession for every key role, or we're working toward perfecting that. And what we're looking for are individuals who have demonstrated the values and the characteristics that make us Aldrich. And so, of course, that's things like business sense and leadership. Can they galvanize a group? Can they establish a vision for their part of the business? Can they align that with the mission, vision, values of the organization? And can they get people excited to do that? And can they do it within our culture, which is really important to us? And so many times in our firm's history, we've identified people, and this happened before me, that by the standards of their age or their experience, they may not quite be ready, but they've demonstrated those characteristics, and when given the chance, they've absolutely flourished.
I love that. Yeah, and I love that you're actively seeking that at all times. Do you recall kind of an early memory in your life when you first maybe even saw yourself as a leader or felt like that was a responsibility that you could take on?
Interesting. My parents would tell you that I assumed the leadership role in the backyard when playing any game. So I think, I don't know whether that was just me being bossy, but my parents identified that actually really early on. And then it was in sixth grade when formally there was a leadership group, and I applied to it, and I was accepted, and I started to understand what leadership was, including making a pretty big mistake that year in sixth grade, and being held accountable for that, and being told that as part of the leadership team of my middle school, I was held to a different standard. And that lesson really stuck with me. And then as I went through college and every role that I've had, I've always kind of gravitated toward leadership roles.
Hmm. That really resonates with me. I remember so fondly just growing up in the backyard playing baseball. Our house was the home run with the tennis ball for that, or playing football and just organizing those groups, and then being named a captain on a basketball team in high school, and just how those early formative years of getting appointed these leadership responsibilities start to take shape. But you talked a little bit about the cost that comes with that. And you really came into your CEO role at a costly time. It was when we needed servant leaders the most during COVID. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what your entry point was like in that transition, and how it maybe tested your commitment to people first leadership and servant leadership, which I know is near and dear to you.
Yeah, that's a great story. It's one of the moments that I've been the most proud to be part of this organization and this partnership. But setting a little context for that, servant leadership has been a concept at Aldrich since before it was popularized, or before I think people began to realize that it's the only real type of leadership. And so much so that when Steve Tatone, who was our CEO, managing partner for 35 years, retired, we realized that he wouldn't want a gold watch as a retirement gift. And so we created an award in his honor, the Stephen M. Tatone Servant Leadership Award, because he was really the one that set the foundation of what it meant to be a servant leader rather than command control in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And so servant leadership has always really been part of who we are. So in the fall of 2019, I came in, and we had a lot of work to do. We needed to align our partnership in a way that we hadn't, to prepare us for the next generation, and we established our first partner creed, which were the principles, in addition to our mission, vision, values, the principles that as partners we would hold ourselves and one another accountable to, and we would put, it's on the wall in my office, it's on the wall in every partner's office, so that everyone could see this is the standard that we're holding. In that, one of the several principles was we recognize that our people are our most precious resource, and we commit to developing their whole person. At the same time, we needed a new strategic plan. And so we established a new strategic plan. And at the top of that plan, we said people are our number one priority. which kind of hit everyone in the forehead, because in a client service profession, that's kind of a bold thing to say. But we really believe in order to improve the lives of our clients and our communities, it starts with having people and making sure that people are here and they can have success in their life and then have success in their career. So we said people are our number one priority. So again, partner creed, we recognize our people are our most precious resource. We commit to developing the whole person. And strategic plan, item number one, our people are our number one priority. In a client service role, we've all been to different organizations who have those things on the walls or may say those things. And coincidentally, I was listening to a leadership book or podcast in February of 2020, and the commentator made the comment that a lot of people consider themselves leaders, but nobody is really a leader until they face crisis. And that really resonated with me, because I'd been in leadership roles, but I'd never been in crisis, really. And we were given the perfect opportunity in March of 2020 with COVID to really be faced with crisis. And so while it's easy to say those things and proclaim those as your values, when put to the test, how did we respond? When we needed to make critical decisions during a time where there was so much uncertainty, there was no guarantee that our business could be a going concern going forward, depending on all that happened. We made the decision and we shared with our people that we are not doing any pay cuts, any layoffs, any furloughs, any benefit reductions, other than the partners were going to take a pay cut for as long as we needed to. Furthermore, and that was unanimous by the partners and the board. Furthermore, we were committing ourselves to radical transparency, and I was telling everyone this from my living room, and I shared, here's our cash balance, here's our AR balance. We are okay financially. All of your benefits are going to remain intact, and now's the time to make the impact on the world. So we're going to support one another. We're going to go out and lead our clients through this. We're going to be the first to market with thought leadership. And that's exactly what happened. And we had the most successful run we had in a very long time during that period. And the level of humanity, support, kindness, and embodiment of our values that I saw during that time was incredibly, it was breathtaking.
That is breathtaking. And I always say it starts from the top. And I'm sure our listeners would agree. You can have all these great values and purpose, mission, vision values. You can put it on the wall, you can reinforce it. But if it's not lived out every day, if those actions don't line up, it's almost worse to come up with those values and then not live up to it, but to actually make those decisions. And what I love about what you said is that it is a strategic advantage to you and that it actually had a positive business outcome on the other end of that. And, constantly a best place to work, top 100 firm, I think your revenues in the tens of millions, if not in the hundreds at this point. You don't need to get into all that, but it's just like you're leading a large scale organization and you're talking about this being a strategy. So dive into that a little bit deeper. Like, let's double click on that. How have you used culture as a lever to drive performance and long-term value, especially given that you're in an industry that's not well known for work-life integration?
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, I think it's difficult to define culture, and there's any number of ways to define it, none of which are wrong. So some objective ways that we can look at it are, what do our people tell us in our Net Promoter Score survey, for instance, or when we enter best places to work, and that is determined by the information that our people give to the publication. How do we do? And we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback on that. That's taken a lot of time. And it all starts when I said we want success for our people in life before profession or career. We reinforce that message, and we set that tone from the day someone joins. And part of the way we manifest that is to say, we expect everyone at this firm to have values priority ordered ahead of work. And for us to collectively work toward honoring those values and making sure that somebody is doing the things in their life to enrich them so that they can show up fully themselves, fully present, ambitious, and ready to go. And so for me, it's really clear. My faith, my wife, my children, my health, those things are all more important to me than Aldrich. And I'm about as ambitious as you can imagine when I show up and try to grow Aldrich because of the purpose behind it. Some of the things that we've done to reinforce that are, we have a generous PTO policy like everyone. When we identified there was a need for an employee assistance program to support people with mental health, with physical health, we did that. A number of years ago, we implemented a mandatory sabbatical program for every employee. And so while a lot of professional services firms will do that for their executives or maybe even the partners, we really felt that that was something that everybody needed. And it's between 6 and 8 weeks, and we completely cut off access. So no email, no work calls during that time. And that has been incredible to watch. I experienced that for the first time last year. And while you can see the benefits of it when you see other people do it, the profound life-changing nature of being able to disconnect and recharge has totally changed the way that I approach, my own. I don't like the term work-life balance, more like work-life integration.
Yeah.
And so when we go through our strategic planning, when we go through acquisitions, everything we do, we're constantly looking at it through the lens of our culture and specifically through the lens of our mission, vision, values.
Hmm. I love that. One of our recent guests and friends here at the Steward Chair is the CEO or president of a multi-billion-dollar healthcare staffing company. And he recently sent out a newsletter that talked about the ROI of rest and how
Yes,
that focus actually comes back and produces results. And you've learned that. But has that ever been counterintuitive to you as a leader to,
of
have
course.
people completely shut off? I mean, gosh, I've grown up in professional services myself. That's been unheard of in my life when I was working for other people. So how have you been able to identify the return on that and feel a level of comfort with kind of making that mandatory?
Yeah, of course it's counterintuitive. Because I grew up in a modern CPA profession. And I started with a big four, and I worked the type of hours that I knew I was going to work, but that are required as part of that. There was really, for a large portion of my career, and this is very self inflicted, there was really no shutting it down. I would check my email, immediately before going to bed. I would check it first thing in the morning. I was constantly on vacations. And I've always been a proponent of work-life integration. I can espouse to other people, why they should disconnect. But it was counterintuitive because that's what we've been trained to do as a profession for so long. Also, it's counterintuitive because, like many of us, we're type A. We're competitive and we're ambitious. We want that edge. And so the life-changing portion of the sabbatical for me was there was only one other time in my life where I didn't have access to email when I was out. And it took me a lot longer to adjust to that sensation of rest, of being able to really relax. And there was a very clear, noticeable difference in the way that I showed up for my family, in the way I slept, in the way I just was. And so as I move forward, I really encourage everybody who does that to, disconnect. I'm taking a family vacation in a few weeks. And I've told my family and my colleagues that I'm going to treat this as a mini sabbatical. So I'm going to do the same thing because on the flip side of that, even though it felt counterintuitive before, because quite honestly, it felt a bit indulgent in my role, my effectiveness and my optimism, my ambition, my energy level, my excitement to come back for the firm and do well for our people, our clients, was at an all-time high on the other end of that sabbatical. And so I recognize, but I don't know how you do it other than to just experience the felt experience of it.
I love that. And I'm sure that everyone can resonate with that as a leader and listening to this show, that they've either experienced the benefit from it or they struggle with that every day, or maybe a little bit of both. And I can distinctly remember as a child when my dad started taking 2-week vacations in the summer and was completely present to our family. I will, like, who takes 2-week vacations and is completely present to their family these days? Because you have your device, you have all these distractions and ways of being connected, but you really talked about the intentional disconnection, which I think is really hard for leaders these days. So how, like, how do you encourage your team to truly disconnect?
Um, First of all, yes, I agree with everything you said. And one thing that I've worked really hard on, and I know this wasn't what you asked, was, and you and I talked about it before, but was the second act. So many leaders do an excellent job preparing for their day. That may mean they put themselves to bed on time. They have morning routines. I certainly do, where I know that when I show up at work, I'm showing up well to support and help people do my job well. And then we use all of our energy and we come home and we walk in, we have no energy left for our family. And so I heard someone talk about the second act at some point. The first act is your business day. The second act is, are you giving the same level of intentionality to the priorities outside of work that you gave to the priorities inside of work? And in my case, that means my wife and my two teenage daughters. Am I showing up well for them, or am I showing up exhausted, not wanting to engage, wanting to be, lazy and sit on the couch? And so how I encourage other people to do it is by sharing my experience, by modeling it. So even if I'm on vacation and I have to be checking email for some reason, it's very unlikely that people are ever going to see an email from me on vacation. So I'm modeling that behavior. I never send emails after 5 or before 8 a.m. If I can help it. And then, sharing my story or encouraging them to talk to people who've actually been able to disconnect and the impact that it's had not only on their lives, but their ability to perform and enjoy what they're doing.
I think modeling it is one of the hardest things. Particularly, you were talking about just when you email people and how and when you communicate, and the signals that that sends. I think a lot of executive leaders like us, we're all busy. So how do you, if something comes in your mind and you want to send an email out at 10 o'clock, but you don't want them to feel like they need to respond immediately, it's almost like you're giving them that responsibility and the feeling that they too need to be in tune with their work at that time. So I've loved the schedule send. If I am up at night and I want to send an email, but I don't want it to really hit the inbox until 8 a.m., I love that schedule send feature.
Yep.
But I'm not always good at it. Sometimes I just hit send and I slip back into that mode. I think if you're in professional services, it's easy to fall back into that rhythm, and you have to have a discipline. It sounds like you're very intentional about it.
I try to be.
Yeah. What I know that there have probably been some unexpected emotional or personal costs of leading a values driven firm at scale. People are watching. If you say that you're going to be a values driven company, people first, people are watching, they're listening, they want to look for the inconsistencies. So how have you learned to manage the short term pressures with the long view of what it means to model that leadership and build an enduring business?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for anyone who works anywhere near me, I think they would tell you that I'm pretty open and I'm pretty vulnerable. And I also tend to be a bit of an emotional person. And leadership requires a certain steadiness, but I also believe that it requires a level of authenticity. And so when I say that, when I show up well, it's also got to be authentic. I can't be faking it. And part of the mission is I had no idea just how rewarding, how fun, and how challenging this role would be. Because there's a lot at stake. I take it very seriously. We are a values driven organization. The interesting thing about being a values driven organization is sometimes values are in the eye of the beholder. And what I mean by that is one of our parts of our vision is that we're an entrepreneurial firm. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. And so that can be taken all kinds of different ways. That can be taken as we need to take more risks. We need to be more, we need to preserve the way we used to do things so people can interpret those values. So there's a lot of subjectivity with it that I didn't anticipate. And as a fairly empathetic person, and I don't say that to compliment myself, when I take personality tests, I can't help but feel other people's feelings. It's really easy, and there are a lot of us like that. It's really easy to carry whatever the response is, the anticipated response, or to even worse, project into the future, how people may negatively react to an action, something you said, and it can be all consuming if you don't rein that in. So for me, more than ever, I've learned the importance of my routine. And that means making sure that I get adequate sleep so I can be mentally acute, making sure that I have the right nutrition, the right exercise, that I'm spending the right time spiritually for me, and doing all those things before the workday even starts. also reminding myself about the purpose in what I do. Because if I make it, very short term in nature, or this is what we have to deal with today, this week, next week, if I make it transactional at all, it loses the purpose. And for me, I'm really clear on my purpose and my role. As an organization, we're really clear that our purpose is to improve the lives of our people, our clients, and our communities. And so when I take it to that, I can kind of zoom out, and realize that we're doing everything for purpose. So I don't know if that answer was precise enough, but it all boils back to making sure I have my priorities and values outside of work and inside of work identified and priority ordered, making sure that I have the discipline to consistently honor those priorities with the actions that I take, and never taking myself too seriously, never getting too high or too low, and always remembering that this is all about the purpose over the long term.
I think that really resonates with me, particularly the discipline and the actions that it takes to fill your own cup and to experience that rest, the spiritual, the family, the health, everything being kind of in balance and being a priority in your life. I think that's where the always on mentality, particularly in professional services, really gets in the way of us being able to get filled so that we can pour out as a leader. We can be that humble servant leader and meet people where they are, and deal with the pressures that come in the day-to-day rhythm of being an executive leader. So I think that's one thing I really want to focus in on with our listeners, is the importance of that early morning routine and how you prioritize your actions. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I'm curious what it means to you leading a high growth firm, that is consistently striving. Like you said, you're highly competitive, you're growing at all times, but you never want to lose your center. And with growth and with introducing new colleagues and new clients, that's always at risk, that's slipping away. So how do you ensure your acquisitions and your expansion aligns with your purpose and your values at its core? And how do you kind of avoid the pitfalls of losing sight of that?
Yeah, this question resonates really deeply with me, because well, first of all, I think you have to start by answering the question, and not just to yourself, but explicitly and to the entire organization. Why does growth matter? There's the old saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. And while that's true, I like to kind of flip that and take a more optimistic view. Growth is really important for us to be able to provide opportunities to the next generation, really to everybody, to grow in their career. And because of the pace of change, growth is important to achieve scale so that we can have an impact on the way we serve our clients, the sophistication, the level of our services. Growth is really important. So knowing why growth is important is always the starting point with me. And I really won't talk about growth unless I remind people why growth is important. When you said it's difficult, when we were at, I don't know, around $60 million, and we were on our way to growing to 100 million, that's about what we'll be this year. I talked to Steve Tatone and I said, we're on this path to double once every 5 or so years through a combination of organic growth, potentially inorganic growth, expanding the services we provide to our clients. And I'm really concerned about losing our culture during that time. And Steve got really serious and said, I know what you mean. I remember when we were going from 1 million to 2 million or 5 to 10 million. And his point was, at every point in the journey, irrespective of the size, it's good and right that we're concerned about culture. And so how do we preserve that is it's a lens by which we make our decisions. So one example of that was M&A. Historically, we've done a number of acquisitions, and over the long run, they've all turned out to be good. I wouldn't say we were historically great at it, like a lot of firms, because it's really difficult. And so, in the last 5 years, we actually, for the majority of that, didn't do any acquisitions, and it wasn't until we defined where we were going. And what I mean by that is, in addition to our strategic plan, we looked out over 5 or 10 years and said, this is where we're going. This is the firm that I will be proud to recruit people into, that I'll be proud to be a part of. This is where we're growing. What is core to that? And then we established our M&A playbook, and our M&A criteria, as well as our integration playbook. So we want to make sure if we were ready to evaluate acquisitions, that we were really ready to do the integrations of those well. And we established our criteria, and it's probably the very first line in there is culture is the first non-starter. So if there's not cultural alignment, we will not do it, no matter how good it looks on paper, no matter how attractive it is from an enterprise value perspective, we won't do it. And to that end, in 2024, I personally spoke with probably 45 different firms. And it wasn't until we met with one firm in particular, and there was an immediate alignment of values from my perspective. I brought, more people from our team in, and it was a heck yeah, high-fiving in the streets of Spokane after we met these people. And I'm really glad we did that, because it's turned out to be a fantastic combination. We have good people and good partners who have the same values. And at the outset of that, we also wanted to talk about desired outcomes. And the desired outcome was, we want to make sure that everyone's life on the other side of this transaction is better. And we were able to kind of wrap up busy season, and we had some hiccups, but by and large, everyone's life is better. We realized some of the synergies we have from having 100 of our people in our India offices, and how well that works. We realized some of the benefits of what we've invested in automation and other technology tools. And we work cross-border really well to serve our niche-based client base.
I think capitalism has so much opportunity for good, and you talk about just improving the lives and elevating the humanity through these transactions, and these are big deals. Running a $100 million plus organization is not nothing. There's a lot of impact that has on your stakeholders, your people, your community, everybody involved. And I love how you explore the mutual benefit, and also that you have a playbook for your M&A and your integrations. That's incredible. I would imagine that when most companies are exploring an M&A, they're not looking over a playbook before that. Everyone is probably unique into itself. So I think that's a hot take right there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well done. We're coming up on time, and I would love to just explore, as a final parting thought to our listeners, this idea of legacy, not just at Aldrich, but as a leader. What impact do you hope to leave behind as a leader?
Certainly an impact that I led Aldrich toward being a lasting business. That is our nomenclature. That's part of our vision, to be a lasting business with entrepreneurial spirit. But it's interesting you asked this question, because I asked a bunch of our leaders recently this question. And when I answered it myself, the legacy that I really hope to leave is someone who led with integrity, growing something, solving complex challenges with people that I trust, respect, and love.
It's beautiful. Simplistic, complex, hard, and beautiful all at the same time. So, John, this was such a gift for me. I learned a lot. I know our listeners learned a lot. Thank you for your investment of time and just sharing this gift of wisdom with us today.
Well, thank you for what you're doing with this podcast. And it was such an honor, Jeff. It was so nice to meet you when I did back in Boston. And I was completely honored when you asked me to participate. And this has been really fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Steward Chair. If today's conversation inspired you, we'd be grateful if you'd follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by Chat with Leaders Media and End of the Line Productions, a collaboration committed to helping leaders steward their influence with purpose and impact. Our production team is Quentin Thomas, executive producer, Thomas Mastrototoro, associate producer, Daniel Mastrototoro, managing editor, and me, Jeff Bond, your creative director, host, and research lead. Until next time, go be a leader worth following.